Toy Story 5 is here because Disney cannot resist beating the tar out of a dead horse. It's Jessie's time to shine, and let's talk about this movie and whether or not we need to continue doing this week on Beware of Spoilers. Good evening and welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. We just went through all the Toy Story movies over on 30-minute reviews, all 5 of them that have come out up until this point, that are available on Disney+. Toy Story 1 through 4, and then Lightyear, which is in continuity because it is the movie that Andy watched that made him fall in love with Buzz Lightyear. All of that said, they were varying quality. Of varying qualities. And the point I'm trying to make with all of this is that it's like, look, there were 2 other things we didn't cover that, like, one of which was, I don't know if it's technically in continuity because, like, I know for certain that the Big Hero 6 world in Kingdom Hearts 3 is technically in continuity as a sequel to Big Hero 6. I don't know if Toy Story is meant to be an interquel between 2 and 3. But it is what it is. So we didn't cover that because I wasn't 100% certain if it was in continuity. Where Woody tells off Xehanort with the power of friendship. All of that said, we also didn't talk about Buzz Lightyear Star Command, which is not in continuity anymore, or it is kind of in continuity. I don't know, who cares? It's Toy Story. But now we have Toy Story 5, which is, I think, real time after 4, because Bonnie was in preschool in 4. And she was just starting preschool then, so she's been 4 years old. It's a little less than real time because she's 8 in the movie. So if she's 8, then that means that it's only been 4 years. All of that is just a long way of saying that some time has passed this time. Woody's been out on the road, and all of these things are kind of, things are different now. And we have the advent of electronics. And I'm just going to get out here and say, I think this is a 4 out of 5. It's not a 5. It's also not terrible. I just think the biggest problem is the movie doesn't commit to anything, and that's a mistake. So, fundamentally, what we have as the antagonist is an iPad. It's a Lilypad. It's called. It's an iPad in a frog case, and Greta Lee voices it. And it's this thing that's like, look, I'm here to move. I'm gonna be the more mature continuation of Bonnie's advancement through her life. And one of the things that kind of struck me as I was watching is that I'm like, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Inside Out 2 in that way, where Inside Out 2 is about the arrival of these other more mature emotions. You have anxiety, you have boredom, you have ennui. Well, no, boredom is ennui. Embarrassment, nostalgia, that kind of thing. Like, these emotions are the things that, and as Maya Hawke says, as the Muppet known as anxiety, like, yeah, she needs more, she needs more mature, complex emotions to deal with life now. So she needs to, that's something that needs to happen. And then she's going to end up taking a Zoloft, and they're all going to beat the fuck out of it. But the issue is, like, the idea that, like, she needs to, she's advancing through life and she needs to deal with these more complex things, and it's about this kid trying to be friendly and make friends. It's an interesting dynamic to create. And I think the other thing that kind of stands out to me here in this is that the humans in this movie, specifically Bonnie, is a key factor in it. Where it's like, to an extent, as we went through the Toy Story revisit. One of the things that we always talked about is that it's like the toys are an avatar for human emotions. The toys are meant to be a look at, like, what does it mean to not have a purpose? What does it mean when someone else comes in and does that? It's like Andy is a plot device. He's not, he's not a character. And then the same with Bonnie, even going into 4, where it's like, look, it's about the toys. Bonnie is very much a part of this movie in a way that they haven't done before in a Toy Story movie, which is kind of an interesting take. But the other thing is, we end up in a situation where it kind of ends up, and I think this is kind of something we should discuss with Pixar as a whole recently. The movie ends up very, like, milquetoast to an extent. Like, the idea that, like, what they're tackling in this movie, this idea of, like, what does it mean for tech to come along and redefine childhood with technology? And it's like this idea of, like, I don't think they quite grapple with that to the degree that they needed to. Because it's like, it's an interesting question where it's like, how much screen time is too much? Are these social feeds that they're giving to these kids, is it something that's causing detriment because it's changing the fundamental dynamics? Are kids who don't adapt to this inherently falling behind socially? These are all interesting, heady questions, but the movie doesn't really grapple with any of them. And I think the other issue is it lumps in other types of toys with the iPad. I think that's kind of the problem, where it is this kind of all or nothing. All tech is bad, or no tech is bad. And dealing in that absolute is kind of the problem, where it's like, look, the iPad is definitely something, and there are definitely times in this movie where you can tell that, like, Joan Cusack is delivering dialogue that was written by someone, and she's just being a mouthpiece for the writer who was feeling that way, where it's like, the kids today with the tech are doing that, like, anytime that happens, I kind of gets, like, glazed over, and I was like, all right, you have an agenda you're trying to put, and look, I'm not pro-tech for kids. My mom teaches very young kids, and she tells me, like, you can tell that kids are coming in developmentally stunted because they're not being read to, and they're not being engaged properly. And it's like, look, there is a detrimental impact to this, and it's the idea that, like, okay, well, the toy that the little girl was using, like, when she was potty training, where it's like buttons on this thing, it's like, how is that different from, in the first Toy Story, Andy having, like a see and say? Not a see and say. It was like that thing where it's like you push the letters and it reads out to you what's on there. How, like, or in kind of the first scene we see in that movie is, this idea of, like, oh, he's going to, he's having this big meeting about the birthday party with the new toys, and nobody's being replaced, and he's using that microphone. Like, how is, like, that's not different enough from that. And then there's the other thing where it's like, the selection of toys for the group of toys that are playing with, that are tech adjacent toys, they're not really meant to be toys aside from the potty trainer. Like, the other one, like, one's a GPS. Like, and I don't understand the use case for a kid's GPS to the point where it's like, this is needed to progress the plot, and we need someone who can navigate, but I don't understand why that is the case. I think that you could have folded that character into, like, a proto-Lilypad version of it, and that would have been a lot smarter. But it's like, why does the kid have a GPS? And then the other issue that this becomes is the idea of the potty training toy being the one that's sending the information. I'm like, I don't believe that, like, because we have to take into consideration, like, the timeline of this, where it's like, we say it's like 4 years removed from Toy Story 4, which, okay, it's 4 years removed from Toy Story 4. Toy Story 4 is very quickly after Toy Story 3. So this movie is like, I don't know, like 2015. Like, we're not talking like this, it's not present times. It's like they're very clearly trying to lay out that it's like this is what it is now. But it's a very weird thing to do. But either way, even if you want to say it's right now, the idea that you have this children's toy to potty train and it's capable of accessing the internet, that feels like a weird choice. That, like, I don't understand why that was something that needed to be done. And that's kind of an odd thing in this. And all of that said, like, I think that that's kind of where this movie kind of, like, falls apart, is that it's like, I think the move was probably to have, like, the arsenal of characters who's there, the proto-Lilypad who gets abandoned, because, like, the thing is, like, Jessie needs to learn in this movie, because Jessie's kind of the main character. She needs to learn that, like, being there for the kids during this part of their life is all you can do. And that's the most important thing, that, like, we got to be there for as long as they need us. That's what our job is, and it's something that she needs to learn through this. And I think that, like, her going to the home of, I think the name was Emily, the first girl that she was owned by, where it was, you know, it was Emily, then Andy, then Bonnie, going back there on accident and ending up as this asshole in the Cybertruck. And ending up kind of in a, you know, in this weird, you know, this house where she ends up seeing all these other people. It's an interesting difference for it, but it doesn't quite breed what you need it to, because you have these three characters who, like, if it was like, oh, well, you know, this camera, like, why is the kid's camera connected to the internet? Why is, like, that's the thing, is that it's like we're getting too far off, and then when you start thinking about it too much, you're like, this is really weird. Like, and it's something that's really kind of questionable. Again, why is the toilet training thing connected to the internet? Like, that feels like something that shouldn't be there. And it points to something a little bit more nefarious in this movie with this company that makes the Lilypad, where it's like, oh, they also made the internet-connected toilet trainer. They also made the camera. Like, they also made the children's GPS device. These are all really weird things in conjunction with each other that, like, why is this one company making all this shit? And I feel like that's kind of a question that the movie doesn't really grapple with, where it's like, just don't think about it. The other issue that I kind of have with this whole thing is that it's like, if it is Jessie goes there, she sees like a proto-Lilypad, and then it's like, you have a character like the microphone thing, or something like that, where it is like, oh, like, you know, playing with technological toys is something that's always been the case. It's not something new. It's something that's always been the case in these, you know, in this world. And that's a interesting difference that you can go with, that I think would have gotten that same thing. And it's like, look, it's just our role. Like, the idea of, like, her learning about that through the obsolescence of these things would have been a really interesting idea, but they don't really grapple with that either. Again, because we are kind of dealing with this kind of, like, milquetoast view of everything, where it's like, again, we talked about it with Hoppers. It's like, it's weird that Hoppers ends off the movie where it's like this guy who's willing to do all of these things to, you know, slightly make it faster to get from point A to point B in this city and destroy all this environment and all of that. Like, he's really a nice guy if you get to know him, and he has a mom, and you should really think about that. Like, it's kind of a weird thing like that. And then what was the other movie that was before that, where it was like, was it another franchise? I don't remember, but there were two consecutive ones where I was like, was it Elio? But the whole thing is kind of a little bit, you know, and Elio having its issue where they removed the queerness of the character was that was the other thing. It's all kind of a little bit weird. And I think that in that same vein, we should also address the Lightyear-shaped elephant in the room, which is the fact that, like, we get an army of buzzes in this movie, which has some really interesting character dynamic. Like, the idea of, like, oh, here's an army of Buzzes that all need to learn at the same time what it's like to be a toy. And they use that as the way to kind of explain, like, why Buzz in the first movie freezes. That's just what happens to toys. It's like, yeah, they're alive. When a human comes along, they freeze. That's just how it works. And it's just a reflex thing they can't control. Like, that's a really, like, it's like, okay, well, you explained that. That, I guess, that was worth the hour and a half trip we took to get there. But all of that said, kind of the issue that I end up going with in this movie. The thing that I look at, and I'm like, you need to better lay out what this is there's no reference to Lightyear at all, which just kind of feels weird. The idea that, like, you went through all this effort to make this movie, and this is this big thing, and you introduce socks, and you introduce all this other shit, but there's no tangible reference to Lightyear in this movie, where it's like, you have this, like, this thing crashes, and what, none of these Buzz Lightyear toys, that, like, this movie was meant to be such a phenomenon in 1995 that it spawned this toy, and, you know, there's not even, like, a socks in there. And then the other thing is, like, there's a great moment where they could reference Lightyear, and they just don't. And it's, you know, they mention Zurg, because Zurg is, you know, Buzz Lightyear's arch nemesis. And the other thing I really like about that scene is that there's also a Star Wars reference in that scene, where it's like, inherently the Zurg, "No, I am your father," obviously is the reference to Star Wars. But the other thing about it is, in this scene, he says to the other Buzzes, he goes, "Search your feelings, you know it to be true." And I was like, yeah, that's clever. You get another Star Wars reference. And then it's the, you know, oh, and Zurg, he's our father. It's a really, like, good little moment. But we just saw an entire movie where that was not the case. And it's like, you have the chance to, you know, correct that, or at least acknowledge this other movie, and you just didn't take that chance. And I'm not saying that was the wrong choice. I'm saying the wrong choice was doing the Ad Astra time travel bullshit in Lightyear, and I think that, you know, this is them being like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. We're just gonna pretend that never happened. Because, like, this would have been the opportunity to have socks somewhere in this movie. And he's just not there. No action figures of any of the supporting cast in that. And it's like, you could have had them somewhere. Like, very early on in the movie, Woody is trying to rescue a toy that has fallen, you know, and the toy is like, it's the end of days because they're, you know, the kids aren't playing with toys anymore, and this toy is stuck in a tree, and all of that. It's like, that could have been like a cameo from Taika Waititi. Like, that was your moment, and you just don't take it. And I'm like, look, I again, not faulting them for it, because Lightyear was maligned, and it's like, we don't want to remind people of Lightyear if we don't have to. But it's just kind of an odd choice that it's like, we're like, it makes it harder to take that movie seriously in any capacity if, oh, well, we're just going to ignore it entirely. So what incentive is there for anyone to watch it on Disney Plus if it's like, oh, well, this was a mistake? I think the better move would be for them to, at this point, remaster the original Buzz Lightyear Star Command and put that on Disney Plus. And I know there's an entire thing about, like, I don't know how true it is. Apparently John Lasseter didn't like the show and the movie, and that was kind of a problem. And even that was, I don't think it was ever referenced in Toy Story 3. Like, there's no reference to Booster or Mira or XR. Like, none of those characters appear. But it's just kind of weird to me that, like, you had this opportunity and you just didn't take it. So what was the point of that? And I'm not saying that, like, we should be referencing Lightyear, but it's like, what are we doing? What was the point of any of this if that's not the case? And again, I think at a certain point we will have to recast Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. And I get that, like, yeah, they are kind of synonymous. And the same goes to even Joan Cusack, who has a great performance in this movie. But the issue is, like, if I'm watching this and I'm listening to them talk, everyone sounds older because people have aged, because you can't stop the interminable march forward of time. That's how, like, the universe works. The idea that, like, these characters who are supposed to be ageless are all sounding older, you're gonna have to recast. And again, we're getting into this point now where this is not just a Pixar thing. This is also a what's it called? This is also a Disney in general thing. Like, how do you handle this issue? We can't keep going back to Steve Rogers, because eventually Chris Evans is going to be too old to get into, like, that shape for that role. We can't keep, you can keep backing the money truck up to Hugh Jackman, but, like, he can't keep getting into that shape healthily. It will kill him eventually to get into that shape. It's not healthy for the human body to do that. It's just kind of a problem to have this movie, you need to recast. And you can't just keep CGI de-aging, because then if the person's playing that role, it just kind of feels a little bit like, oh, well, why is this person, moving like an 80-year-old man, and he's meant to be like 30? Like, that's not how a 30-year-old walks. Like, it's just things like that. Like, that was the big issue, like, with the de-aging of Robert De Niro in The Irishman, where it's like, yeah, I know what Robert De Niro looked like and when he was this age, and I know how he moves, and this is how Robert De Niro moves now. No problem, no fault to him. I mean, the man's in his 80s. This is how he moves now. This is not how he moved back in the 70s when he was playing characters this age. And it's just kind of, that's the thing, is that it's like, if Woody and Buzz are meant to be ageless because they're these toys, eventually you're going to have to recast, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with. And look, Chris Evans may have almost been that, but I don't think Chris Evans was the problem with that movie. And by the way, if you have any emotional attachment to When Somebody Loved Me, the song from Toy Story 2, you're gonna get your heart ripped out in this movie. And that's the thing that I think, like, really, like, because we really get into Jessie and let Jessie explore, like, her loss, it's a really interesting dynamic. It's just a shame that the movie doesn't, like, because it's kind of like it's kind of beholden to the two masters of, like, it's trying to be Jessie's story and also trying to be the story of, like, Bonnie dealing with this Lilypad. Like, I keep calling it a Lilypad, but it's not. It's an iPad it's called, like, a Lilypad. Like, that's a interesting, like, the interesting parts of both end up falling by the wayside for the superficial, which is kind of a shame. Like I said, it's a 4. I mean, there's enough entertaining stuff. I love the sequences where we get to see Bonnie using her imagination, and, like, you get, like, the 2D animated sections of, like, everyone in costume, Bonnie and the other girl too. And it's a really interesting thing. I like I like the dynamic of the characters. There's a lot in this movie that feels a little off, and, like, just a little off is not a good place that I'll be happy with you leaving me. Which is why it's a 4. I mean, look, it's not offensively bad or something that, like, I wouldn't watch again. Like, Toy Story 4, I think I have no interest in ever watching it. I've now watched it twice. I never want to watch that movie again. This one, there's nothing in it that's, like, aggressively bad, and maybe on a rewatch I'll have a different appreciation for it. But there's nothing about it that I need to run out and, like, I gotta go watch this again right now. But we'll wrap up there for today. We might have another episode tomorrow. I'm undecided at this point. We might go see either Girls Like Girls or The Death of Robin Hood. I'm undecided. But definitely next week on Wednesday, we'll be talking Supergirl. And until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.
Before you go, I also write fiction. My newest novel, Succession Planning, is out on August 28th, available both in paperback and an ebook. It follows a journalism grad stuck managing a store while the owners wage a quiet war over who takes over the business. It's about ambition, inertia, and taking the easiest choice. The link is in the description. That's Succession Planning, out on August 28th.